I'm sure that when many of us think of mummies, we envision the bandage-wrapped corpses from ancient Egypt or the accidentally preserved bodies of bog mummies. In actuality, mummies are more widespread than most people would think, and both deliberate and unintentional mummies have been found across the world, from Europe to North and South America. Some of these mummies are among the oldest and most well-preserved that have ever been discovered. While there have been a few more modern mummies, like Vladimir Lenin and Alan Billis, the practice of intentionally preserving and displaying human remains has been very rare in the past few centuries. However, in today's video, we'll be talking about a 1920s mummy from the United States called Eugene, and the mystery surrounding him. Our story begins on June 8, 1929, in Sabina, Ohio in the United States. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other and visitors to the small town were not that common, which is why many residents remembered seeing an elderly African-American man they did not recognize walking through the town. He walked slowly and was hunched over, appearing to be ill or in pain, but he apparently still tried to nod or wave at people he passed. Residents who saw him believed that he had wandered through Sabina to look for work. When the man finally reached the outskirts of town the next day, whatever illness or condition he was facing overcame him and he was found dead in a ditch by the highway.
Some 60 years ago, an unknown black man was walking along this road about 3 miles outside of town. Word was that he came to Sabina looking for work, but never made it. His body was discovered lying here along the roadside. Townspeople say he died, apparently, of natural causes.
A farmer found his body and immediately notified the town's funeral director. The man's body was taken to a local funeral home to be embalmed while authorities attempted to identify him. His death was ruled by the coroner as being due to natural causes. Upon searching his pockets for any clues, they found $1.40 and a piece of paper with a Cincinnati address written on it. Thinking that they may have uncovered his identity, authorities visited the address to find that it was just an empty lot. The only information that they were able to gather was that the closest neighbor to this address was named Eugene. With their only lead getting them no further evidence, authorities began referring to the unidentified man as Eugene. After preserving the body, it was decided that Eugene would be put on display in a brick shed outside of the funeral home in the hopes that someone would recognize him and he could be laid to rest under his real identity. This location was right near a bus stop, so people were hopeful that someone passing through Sabina on their travels may happen upon Eugene and know his real identity. Buses began using this stop as a chance to get passengers to stretch their legs, and they were encouraged to take this opportunity to get a look at Eugene. He was well taken care of. His body was laid on a couch, he was regularly cleaned to ensure he did not get dusty, and he got new clothes when his started to look shabby. While you may think that the townspeople found having a mummy on display a bit disturbing, that actually wasn't the case. Many considered Eugene to be sort of an unofficial mascot of their town, and they enjoyed visiting his body in the shed. One person who visited Eugene's body when it was on display said, "When I was a child, my sister and I used to visit our great aunt in Sabina, Ohio. She lived across the street from the Littleton funeral home. We played with a little girl who lived at the home. We used to play around the coffins and were always fascinated by the body on display out in a small brick building in the yard. Eugene was what they called him. His body was laid out on a platform behind bars, so you couldn't touch him. We were children and didn't think much about why he was there, but we made many visits to see him. I remember staring at him for long periods of time because he was just so interesting to look at. We had not experienced a death yet to anyone we knew and didn't fully understand what death was. We didn't have much to do, and where else could you go look at a dead body up close?" As word of the mystery mummy got around, Eugene attracted many visitors who were traveling through the area, and people even came specifically to see the unusual exhibit. By 1946, Eugene was well known, and people hounded the funeral director to take his body on a tour. He eventually agreed, and Eugene fascinated the crowds at the Ripley's Farmer Festival and the Circleville Pumpkin Festival. Eugene was displayed for 35 years, and in this time, it is estimated that more than 1.5 million people traveled to Sabina to see his body. No one was ever able to recognize him. While most people were respectful of Eugene, several pranks were pulled that disturbed his body. Local kids would move the mummy to random places as a joke or try and steal the gold teeth out of his mouth. Someone who visited Sabina in the 1950s posted his memories of Eugene, saying, "Eugene was a famous figure back then, especially at Halloween. He often appeared on the front porches of homes with a little help from his friends and terrorized more than a few houses. Some of his fingers were missing, but he was kept well dressed in his black suit and had a rather serene look of composure on his face. I used to spend a few minutes of each visit talking to him and asking him questions like where he came from and if he had a family. As expected, no communication was established, but I did attempt to comfort him with a prayer for his soul and his loved ones at the end of each visit. While the theft was already frowned upon, one kidnapping eventually went too far when teenagers stole Eugene's body and transported him to the Ohio State University in 1964. They placed him on a bench in the middle of the night to surprise students arriving to campus the next morning. The funeral home in Sabina was notified after people stumbled upon the mummy, and this was the final straw for them. It was decided that Eugene would be laid to rest in the town's cemetery. He was given a simple but dignified committal service, and this was the concluding chapter of 35 years of mystery. His gravestone reads, Eugene, found dead 1929, buried 1964. People still visit the town of Sabina to stop by Eugene's grave and pay their respects. Someone who visited the cemetery posted instructions on how to reach Eugene's grave in case anyone is interested. Someone who visited the grave in 2018 also posted about her experience. She said, I took the pilgrimage out to Sabina on a Sunday while the sun was setting. After some searching and researching, I found Eugene's plot under a large shade tree next to the road. His tombstone is flat to the ground and completely ordinary looking, except for the hundreds of coins scattered around the inscription. A tiny red Buddha figurine, a large silver coin with Bible verses and a dove, and several smooth stones are among the trinkets and gifts also on the gravestone. The coins are a symbol of people who have visited over the years, tokens of remembrance of Eugene. The other trinkets from various religions are gifts of respect for the dearly departed. And so ends the strange story of Eugene the Mummy. While we can always remain hopeful that someday someone will finally come forward and reveal his true identity, it seems less and less likely as the years pass. Thankfully, even though he will probably remain a mystery, Eugene can now rest in peace. I'd love to hear your opinion on this case. Do you think it was right to make Eugene into a spectacle, or should the town have quietly buried him when no one recognized him shortly after his death? Thank you for making it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, I would really appreciate it if you would consider supporting me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave a comment below. I hope to explore more oddities and mysteries with you. Our world is a strange one, and I hope you join me in learning about some of the more curious and eerie happenings. Thank you.